Howdy, my name's Quentin, It Reads and Rambles, and I'm here doing a quick Whateverday Reads video about the stuff I've been reading recently. I am not going to include John Skelton's Bouge of Court. I plan on doing a video for that. We'll see if I have time. Skelton's Bouge of Court, Porcupines and China Dolls by Robert Arthur Alexie. I'm going to talk about in video form. I'm also going to do a video on The Gooford Grapevine by Charles W. Chestnut, which is an amazing short story that I'm reading for an essay right now. I'm very happy that I learned about that in the class because that's really good. Yeah, that's what I'm not going to talk about. So what am I going to talk about? Well, I'm going to talk about the stuff that I read on and just before reading week, because I went to Toronto basically to just get away from the schoolwork and, you know, do my own thing for a little bit. Didn't even bring any schoolwork. And I was just thinking, man, I need to just focus on, I need some Quentin time, you know what I mean? Yeah, so what did I read when I went to Toronto? Well, thank you for asking. I'll tell you, what I read was first Last Words from Montmarte by Qiu Miaojin, I believe it's pronounced. And this is a fascinating experimental novel that takes the form of 20 letters. There are 2 letters 17, so I guess it's kind of 21, plus 2 witness sections, and they can be read in any order. And when I was reading it in sequence, I kind of scoffed at that notion. I thought that, well, obviously, like, what's so experimental about this? Maybe it's all the Tudor poetry that I've been reading, but I'm constantly, in the first half of this book, I was constantly reading the narrator as somebody who is trying as hard as she possibly can to manipulate this Shu girl, right? And in a way that's kind of true, but it is also just an amazing testimony of love and an amazing sort of declaration of these terrible feelings that involve love. Our narrator is a sort of poet, philosopher, stalker. At least that's how I read her for the first half, and then all of a sudden the book really does take on, instead of just these sort of rhetorical moves where she will include letter 5 after letter 11, I believe, letter 17 before letter 5, and then, you know, keep going. I thought those were just rhetorical moves, but there's one point where, so our narrator's talking, I'm sorry, I'm not getting to it, but our narrator's talking about being transformed by her desire, by her love for Shu and Yong, and, or for Shu mainly, but Yong is sort of in there as well. And what goes on is that there is a point where the way I'm reading it, and there are multiple ways to read this, is I'm reading it as if our narrator has successfully been transformed by that desire into Zoe, a person of ambiguous gender. Zoe takes on male and female pronouns occasionally. It's really interesting what's going on in here, and I feel like the deeper I talk about it, the less I'm gonna seem to know what I'm talking about. So I'm gonna stop, but I'm gonna stop after I read 2 sections, because one thing you have to know about this is that the care that Qiu Miaojin gives to these thought processes in love is just unparalleled. Well, I don't know about unparalleled, but it's very accurate and it's very specific, and I can guarantee you've felt some of the ways that Qiu Miaojin is basically feeling. Some parts of this read like an I novel, a weird experimental I novel. It's not, but it actually feels, that similarity to an I novel feels kind of akin in some ways to a book like So the Wind Won't Blow It All Away by Richard Brautigan, where, you know, there are sections from that book that feel like they're just ripped directly from his life, but then it's given this surrealist touch at the end that is even more true to reality than anything else could be in that situation. The same thing is happening in here, but instead of, I'm not going to say what happens to the narrator in So the Wind Won't Blow It All Away, but it's one of my favorite things in literature that I've ever read. But in this, the narrator changes, right? But I don't know how I got there, but what I'm going to do is go right back to an example of the prose. Also, these letters are possibly not being sent, and they address different people. Certain letters, we don't know if they're sent or not. Young, I don't long for an eternal perfect love anymore. It's not that I have stopped believing in it. The 2 times in my life I could have had eternal perfect love, both wilted on the vine. I've ripened, wilted, fallen. Young, I've burned completely. I've already bloomed fully. The first wilted because I was still too immature and missed my chance, and the second wilted prematurely because I was overripe. But even if I blossomed for a split second, even if I only blossom for a split second, I blossom fully. Now all I have to do is accept and face the facts about these 2 crippled loves, because I'm still alive. Ellipses. Ah, oh, that's so good. It's such an impactful way of describing those feelings, and the feelings in this are going to ring true whether or not you're gay, whether or not you're a lesbian, whether or not you're a woman, whether or not you're Chinese, you're Icelandic, you're Antarctican, you're Canadian, you're Italian. They're going to ring true for you. Everybody feels these things, and Qiu Miaojin is just so good at putting language to it. I'm not going to talk about how the author's suicide plays into the interpretation of the book. I don't want to bother. Just know that her favorite author, the narrator's favorite author, was Osamu Dazai. And of course, she brings it up explicitly, no longer human in the book. Yeah, but here we go. Here's another thing. All right, I'm gonna read just the full paragraph. Also, again, suicide is a different thing in this culture. Suicide. As for the sheer animosity that has split us apart, that animosity buried for a whole year deep in our hearts, as for the wrongs she's done to me this past 6 months, that have wrought havoc and devastation in my life, her coldness, her selfishness, her lashing out, her indifference, her betrayal, all this has accumulated in my flesh like a lingering illness, and the scars she's left on me, my explosions, her resentment toward me deepening each day, leading to the final wrong she committed against me, I will no longer reflect this back onto her, and if it continues, I won't let it distort my sincerity towards her. All as it hurls toward my death. Resolution in death. My resentment toward her and lack of compassion for myself will melt away upon my death. I will unite completely with her in my death. Our compassion, our love for each other. My death will be a final act of prayer for her forgiveness and repentance, a final effort to help her grow whole. Right? That's a beautiful passage, and what a compelling gesture that is. But the way I'm reading the book, I'm not reading it like the narrator kills herself. I'm reading it like the narrator's, that version of herself dies and makes way for Zoe, right? That's how I'm reading it. But obviously with the author's suicide, that passage is going to take on new meaning for you if you look into the author. Yeah, it's interesting. Don't agree with it. That's going to be my catchphrase for a lot of the books I talk about here. Okay, so last words from Montmarte. It's very good. Definitely check it out. What else do we got? Next thing I read was The Tramp Steamer's Last Port of Call by Alvaro Mutis. The Adventures and Misadventures of Maqroll. I would say The Tramp Steamer's Last Port of Call is the second best of the Maqroll novels so far. First, it is Ilona Comes with the Rain, which really is one of the best things I read 2021. There are not much novels that are out there that are better than Ilona Comes with the Rain. I'm just going to be honest. It's Ilona Comes with the Rain, Tramp Steamer, Snow of the Admiral, and Belle Marie. That's how I rank the first 4. And it's a brilliant book, definitely. It's definitely brilliant. It is sort of this romance story that Maqroll is barely even mentioned in this story. It's just really good. But everything about Alvaro Mutis and his prose style and the style of writing that he employs is here. You get a awesome sea yarn as well as a awesome existential romantic story, existential romance. You get also these interesting sort of insights that are just, his sentences are just leading with these sort of insights that are just so beautiful. Yeah, like just listen to this. Nights in the swamps, under the warm, throbbing phosphorescence of a star-filled sky, were conducive to Joan Ituri's long confession. Wow. Oh yeah, and here's another one. The captain's insistence on Warda Bashur's beauty had something reiterative about it, like the chanting of psalms or ballads. I was moved by his struggle with words, which are always so inadequate, so remote from a phenomenon like a person's beauty when it verges on what is essentially ineffable. Like, and it's so interesting because there's so many aspects of this romance that are so true. You know, obviously it is not Maqroll, it is the compiler. He is talking to a sailor named John Ituri, and he's asking this guy basically about this tramp steamer that he's seen, this ship that basically our narrator sees it at least 4 times. He tells us about 4 times, and every time our narrator sees it, afterwards when Joni Ituri is talking about this tramp steamer, we understand that the narrator has seen it at times that are very critical in the relationship between Joni Ituri and Warda Bashir, who is Abdul Bashir's, Maqroll's henchman. Maqroll is his henchman. It is Abdul Bashir's sister, and Abdul Bashir basically prophesies to our narrator that this love will only last as long as the ship. And basically what that gets is this sort of, this love story that eventually takes on this sort of not frantic, there's this sort of deterministic quality to it where both Warda and Ituri know that it's going to end. And it's so beautiful because when it does end, and everybody knows it's going to end, Ituri is no longer Ituri. He can't be the same person after that love has ended. And there's such brilliant passages in here where you get the passage I read talks about words and language, and Ituri basically says something along the lines of, when you're with somebody and you're in love with somebody, language doesn't mean a thing. Who cares about it? It's all just the warmth of this person, against you when you're cuddling in bed. It's all, it's a kiss, and it's the warmth that bubbles up inside you. But the second that person is gone, language is the only consolation. Language is the only thing that, you try to use it to sort of reassemble this person, and you can never do it, and it just winds up being hollow. But that's sort of why we use language, to recover things that, that might not be recoverable, but it's still an admirable effort to do. And there's so much in this book about this tramp steamer, about language, about romance, existential insight that is just so beautiful. I really want to just read the whole thing. I would read this whole thing for you. I want to do an audiobook of this. But yeah, I'll just read another little bit. Also, more on the tramp steamer. It's called the Halcyon. Of course, we're talking about the mythical bird that roosts at sea, but we're also talking about a lover, I think, and that sort of ambiguity to the symbol is very key, right? The Halcyon has this quality where every time the narrator sees it, he understands that the Halcyon is breaking down. He sees that there's rust everywhere on it in Helsinki, and after a while it gets this new paint job, but it's very clearly just nothing but rust. It's gonna die, and the last time he sees it, there's this tremor that runs through the entire ship that is just so beautiful. The narrator and Ituri both feel this sort of solidarity for this ship that I too feel when I read this, and I can't help but feel for the ship and feel for Ituri and feel for the narrator in a way that it just strikes me right to the core of who I am. And I love this book. Yeah, so if you want more examples of what the writing is like, keep in mind it's this for 60 pages. The tramp steamer entered my field of vision as slowly as a wounded saurian. I could not believe my eyes. With the wondrous splendor of St. Petersburg in the background, the poor ship intruded on the scene, its sides covered with 30 streaks of rust and refuse that reached all the way to the waterline, the captain's bridge and the row of cabins on the deck for crew members and occasional passengers had been painted white a long time before. Now a coat of grime, oil, and urine gave them an indefinite color, the color of misery, of irreparable decadence, of desperate, incessant use. The chimerical freighter slipped through the water to the agonized gasp of its machinery and the irregular rhythm of driving rods that threatened at any moment to fall silent forever. Now it occupied the foreground of the serene, dreamlike spectacle that held all my attention, and my astonished wonder turned into something extremely difficult to define. This nomadic piece of sea trash bore a kind of witness to our destiny on earth, a pulvis eris that seemed truer and more eloquent in these polished metal waters, with the gold and white vision of the capital of the last Tsars behind them. That's like a third of a paragraph, and oh my God, is that ever good writing? I love the existential weight to this book, but I'm just going to go on now about some books that I've been, that I got in Toronto and that I sort of want to get to, right? Cool. Cool. Oh, crap, son. I got bad hair, man. I bought another copy of The Recognitions because I left it at home and I was like, well, I could pay $15 to get someone to send me my copy of The Recognitions, or I can get a copy of The Recognitions that didn't take a shit kicking when I read it the first time. And what I've been doing with this book is just opening it to at random and just following along for like 3-4 pages. And I did that like 4 times so far, 5 times, and wow, I'm just enjoying it so much. I don't think the book is incredibly difficult. I was talking to Rick Harsh about it, and I asked him what he thought of The Recognitions and the difficulty that always gets talked about. And what he said is that you know, it's just outside of people's norm. That way of, you know, doing discussing the party scenes are outside of people's norm, and it teaches you how to read it. And if you're not learning how to read it, that's not difficulty, that's resistance to the author's techniques. And I totally agree with that, because once you learn how to feel for those party scenes, they're not that difficult at all. They're just, you have to learn and feel in a different way, right? And that's always admirable. But Recognitions, it's great. It's great. Amazing work. I also got the Marquis de Sade. I got Bind Up Justine, Philosophy in the Bedroom, and Other Writings. It has some sort of, I think, biographical works about Sade, dialogue between a priest and a dying man, last will and testament, 7 letters. Yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff going on in the early pages of this that I'm very excited. I got this thing for like $10 at Pandemonium in Toronto. Yeah, $10, and I basically looked at the other volumes of Sade on my shelf, and I'm like, well, I can sell these for like $20. And so what I did, what I'm gonna do, I should say, is basically bring all my Sade to the bookstore and get back more money than I paid for this. And also, I didn't want to buy, I think it's Juliet, because, you know, I'm interested in Sade, but I'm not so interested that I would want to read 700 pages of blasphemy, and I'm not going to get into the specifics of it, but if you know, you know. And another thing I've been reading, I've been looking at, I should say, it's not really reading, Zak Smith, pictures showing what happens on each page of Thomas Pynchon's novel Gravity's Rainbow. Zak Smith is an artist that he's an artist, he's a painter, he's a photographer, he is a porn star, and he's a pornographer. And Zak Smith's a very interesting figure. He makes role-playing games as well. And these are interesting drawings. I love the textures of darkness in here. I love the, you know, Grigori looks great in these. I love so much about these. I love that the drawings can be incredibly basic as to what's happening, incredibly sparse and bare, but they can also be incredibly dense and textural, and there's so much stuff going on. I also love how interpretive they can be. I'm really enjoying this thing, and it's great because every time I go to bed, I just take, I look at maybe 10 or so of these, and I just adore them. Also, we're gonna play a game here. If you can guess the scene the first scene I went to in this book, because I know generally where it is. The first scene I tried to look at to see what he drew for it. You win $1 million. But yeah, Zak Smith, picture showing what happens on each page of Gravity's Rainbow. This thing has been making me want to go back to Gravity's Rainbow. Yeah. For a 3rd time. The itch is there, but you know, obviously it's probably not going to happen soon. I got The Recognitions. I've got I want to read Giles Goat Boy, JR. People have been selling me on Alan Moore's Jerusalem, which that might be interesting to me, but I don't know, we'll see. Anyways, that's all I want to talk about for today. I hope your day is going well. Yeah, that's really it. I'm going to upload a video on the Gufford Grapevine next, I believe. And then I'm going to talk about some more school stuff because, you know, I might as well get something out of that school stuff in the way of content. But yeah, peace and groovy, eh? And I don't know, I hope you're enjoying life there.